Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, now we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Howard, you did speak at the very beginning just about the part of storytelling, about how it fits in general.
I did. You
Okay,
can go.
perfect. All right. So just a brief recap as well, and this one is very brief. From the past webinars, we looked at how in this day and age, there's loads of data and loads of information that's constantly coming at us, and that our brains and our brains don't know how to handle this information. And also we looked at how data demands some sort of response from us, and we want to be at the forefront of that response and giving the appropriate response, because many people, generally many companies, have access to big data, but they're not trained on how to communicate that message effectively as it passes down the value chain, even to managers and so forth. So really this storytelling course is about how to use storytelling elements to translate those messages into management and executive roles, and even within a department, and to make sure that the message is understood by everyone, in a way where people can come up with, employers, anybody can come up with the right action and the right strategies towards the data. And ignoring the voice of data and interpreting the message incorrectly can prove detrimental to your business. Our world, this world, in this day and age we are, is built on messages, and any company or any business that gets at the forefront of what's going on with using the data will have success. We discovered storytelling is indispensable technique in communicating messages in a way that the human anatomy was built to receive them. And like I said last week, it's really about working with the human anatomy in the way that it was meant to receive messages, because the brain doesn't just absorb any information that it's given, no matter how badly we want it. Sometimes we're screaming messages, they're big, they're bold, but the brain is can only work the way that it was made to work. And if you think at a time like when you were at school, high school, or even now, when you tried your very best to study for a test or learn lines off by heart, or even learn lines for a speech, but nothing seemed to stay. And 30 minutes later, you had forgotten everything. Sometimes you think you've crammed everything in, you wake up the next morning and it's wiped clean, it's all gone. And it's just like flowers need a specific environment so that they can thrive, otherwise they die, and if they're not meant to be in such an environment, in the wrong environment. The brain also needs an environment in order to make sense of and retain information, especially information that is complex. That will be information like numbers, graphs, abstract information that seems as if it's not connected, and you want the brain to connect the dots. This information must be presented in a way that aligns with the brain's cognitive processes. If it's not, the brain may keep it in short-term memory and just immediately discard it. And once the brain is able to make sense of the information and store it, then our teams, we will be able to use the information to come up with business strategies. In short, storytelling serves as the key that unlocks the brain's capacity to make sense of information, and to also internalize it and leverage on complex ideas and complex thoughts and complex strategies. So really, I mean, there was a lot that I spoke about, but that I've just summarized it in the different webinars. But Debbie does have a recording. And
Okay,
storytelling.
so Julia,
Yes.
can I ask you a question? And that was something
Yes.
that that's what got us on this communication, and I'd love to hear your view on it from a
Yes.
movie point of view. One of the things that we do battle with is first of all attracting the right audience to hear the message. And both Mark that was talking about it, he's organizing big conferences, and we really battle to get that message across. So now you've got two challenges. One is When you've
Okay.
got everybody sitting down and listening, then you can establish a general relevance. But it's
Yeah.
getting people to, first of all, sit down and almost want to hear the message. So there's these two components. Now, I get when you're in a business, you're going to set up a meeting and people understand that you're trying to achieve something. But it's almost that first level of communication. What makes them want to come and listen before you can even engage them to hear and get the brain going? What's that initial outreach that we need to focus on?
Thank you for that question. So initially, firstly, I want to say that let's not despise what time can do. Time's on our side, because if I mean, it was January at the beginning of like just January just yesterday, and now it's the end of the year. So something like storytelling and something like changing people's mindsets takes time, and it takes consistency. But you have to put different digits in place to teach people that. So I spoke in the beginning, I spoke in the first webinar, I spoke about the power of images, and that with the images, basically images are processed in the part of the brain that's responsible for long-term memory. So already when someone is looking at a picture, you're already winning, because whether they like it or not, their brain's is gonna remember it. Sometimes there's stories that you hear and you think, oh, that story is not important to me. As a person, that's your thought, but your brain's taking it in because of the different digits that you've placed, the different storytelling elements that you've placed within there. So for me, my suggestion would be for you to look at a 2 to 3 year rollout to change mindsets. It might, and you'll already see the difference within a month. So what that looks like, and I'm just going to quickly speak about people that are in the office and people that are working from home. So what that looks like within the office, it looks like posters with different images encouraging what it is that you want to get out. You want people to be interested in changing. You want people to be interested in coming to the conversation. With different things within the business. You want people to be interested in where the business is headed. You want people to buy into the vision of the business. You want what else, Howard, could I put in there that you would want in
Um,
terms of, yeah.
so maybe just to the scenario that we have is
Yes.
on several situations we set up conferences, and we try to attract, a lot of times we try to attract not just the professionals, but also the business people, to attract them to be able to get them to see the value of or get them to engage in the data, the story about data.
Okay.
So we sometimes battle to reach that audience. It's relatively easy to reach other data management professionals, but sometimes we're not getting the right audience to attend, and so we keep on talking to ourselves. And I always have this term: it sort of becomes a divorce care community, where we all crying about the same problem, but we actually need to be hearing from others that uh, stretch us and get us to think of other conditions.
Yes, and the question when making movies, the major thing is always asking questions like why. So in your rollout, in your 2 to 3 year rollout, before you even start putting visual imagery to combat why people are not coming, we need to understand the whys. And I'll speak about that later. You need to understand, okay, why is it? So if I have to go to a conference about something, it has to be within my interest. If I'm not
Yeah,
interested, I'm not going. And
yeah,
how do we get these things within interest before? Because now the thing is, we can't tell them the message and get them to engage on a storytelling level when they're in the room. We have to get them in the room first
yes.
before that can actually work. But that message works out of the room, and so that message would have to come through in company. So you'd have to go into the company and do an entire rollout. It would have to come in with company messaging. It has to come in with videos. If the CEO is sharing something, it's so someone would look at it like propaganda. Maybe it is propaganda, but that's how the movie business is built. So it's built on repetition. It's built on testimony. So the testimony of someone saying, "Oh man, that business was amazing because." But if no one shares within the business and everyone is just hoping that someone will come and are not using different digits that are available, it's never going to change. And these things do take time, but you're changing a whole culture. And unfortunately, especially with people working from home and with so much that's going on in the world, there's a lot of things that don't interest people anymore, especially if it doesn't pertain to them, they couldn't be bothered. So how
Yeah.
do we get to pertain to them, to speak to them when they're not in the room? And you
Yeah.
have to use they are in the room because they have to hand in work. They are in the room because they have to log into a meeting, and you have to use those meetings that are necessarily not about the data procedures or data governance or data storytelling to aid in good quality data. So, but it could be about something completely different. And every now and then you put in a key message. So you would speak to whoever's presenting, the manager. So he's presenting a meeting that it's compulsory, everyone must attend, but it's not about this. And each time he is giving value to storytelling, he's giving value to procedures that need to be in place. Like it can be one sentence, but it comes with a visual image. And before you know it, over time, it starts to bring the value back into that thing. But also it's important that we get the reasons. Like what would be some of the reasons? Has anybody found out why they're not attending? I know why I wouldn't attend something, but has I know I know why I would duck and dive.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but why, I mean,
And so I'll hand it over to Mark and Di just now. But a lot of the times, what we find is that business don't naturally engage in data management because they perceive it to be an IT problem, and IT needs to fix the problem. They have enough of their own problems, and so there's the challenge. But maybe just to ask Mark and then Di, in terms of why is it that we battle to get the right people into the room so that we can have the right discussions. Mark, any comments from your side?
Um, I I don't have the connections with the CXO community, if you will,
Right.
or
Right.
even the layer necessarily below that, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of need my data community people to go back and talk to their leadership, and that's what
Right.
I've been trying to encourage them to do. Because I personally I don't know every CDO in Calgary.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the DBAs in Calgary, but even keeping
Yeah.
track of all the DBAs in Calgary isn't doing me any good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then how can you reach them, even if it's paid advertising? How can you reach them within the forums that they will be in? So if you make
Right.
a 30-second video,
Mhm.
and that 30-second video is one heck of an inspiring video. We're not even talking about the people in the business yet. We're actually talking about the people that will implement these things. So we're talking about the ones on a higher level. What universal themes I would ask would relate to them. So when they see that 30-second commercial that we place in the forums that we would find them, how is that going to impact them to think about, let me actually get a hold. It looks like there's something. So I would also include in that 30-second a short testimony of someone within business that has gone through the data training.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the reason I'm here today. I'm here to learn from you
Okay.
how to get those people in there, how to tell my story so people come in the room.
Yes. But everyone is free to also give suggestions here, because when we get our brains all thinking and suggesting, then we find perfect stories or stories that relate to everyone. So if there's someone in this room that's a business orientated person and likes to skip on meetings, please feel free to tell us why.
I do think you're right, Yule and Mark. We certainly know of a company or an individual. His name is Craig Stewart, and he constantly focuses at the level of executive, CDO, CMA, and things like that. So he's constantly building relationships and he manages to get the people around the table to come and listen to the talks and come and discuss data. Now, exactly the technique that he does it, I'm not entirely sure, but you know, he just has so many relationships that when he calls out or presents an opportunity to meet, he's got all of the people listening to him, and the people respond appropriately. You know, just the other day, he phoned me to say, Howard, please, can you quickly come to Stellenbosch? We're having a CDO meeting of 15 people, and they would like to get and have a panel discussion in a certain area. Now, it's those type of people that we're not connecting to appropriately. And what do we need to change to do that? But I think I've said enough. Di, anything from your side?
Yeah, thank you, Yule. I've got a page of notes from you already, and I love the thing of images and relating to people at that different level through a topic, a theme. So I know what I use in my workshop is the theme of water. So the database is a lake. So and glasses of water. And when I'm talking about, oh, I see you're drinking, Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So glasses of water that are at different levels of purity. So, and from that, I have the theme of, so how do we clean the water? So in South Africa, we had the water shortage a few years ago. Now we've got load shedding. Can we maybe make a story around these things and not necessarily just talk about data, but talk about something that a problem that they have in the organization and then relate it back to data. Maybe we could do that.
Yes,
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you for that. That's a brilliant idea. I mean, unless if we think about Hollywood films or films, there's a lot of films coming up that are not only from Hollywood, but if we think about films in general that do well at the box office, some of them they don't need to market and they don't need to advertise because they've already got well-known names, right? But
Yeah.
now we're coming from a space where we need to advertise because people don't actually see the value. I see the value in going to watch Leonardo DiCaprio. I do, but
What about Barbie? Tell me, how did they get Barbie right?
I don't know how they got Bobby right, but Bobby didn't speak to me, but it spoke to most of my friends. I was like, you guys are getting dressed in pink. What's going on? And they went. But so they got it right. I must evaluate how they got it right. That's a good one. But Hollywood, when they put out a film, they actually market it.
Yeah.
They do market it. And sometimes box office hits are not marketed, but others are marketed. And back in the days, there used to be a lot of trailers, when
Yes.
we're watching TV and billboards, and you'll just see, the next Marvel movie. You see it in a billboard, that looks cool. And then there was that trailer voice as well, and times have changed slightly, and the marketing strategies have changed slightly, but they still do market. And it's important for us to not only invest in the training, but also, and not invest in just the storytelling part, but part of the storytelling is to invest in the marketing and to find the right places for the marketing. So your marketing is not wasted, but you have to get into the room and you have to research where are the executives? What touches executives? Do we meet them at a golf course? Do we do an executive brunch? You throw different ideas. Until the right idea surfaces. But to get people in a room where they come up with all different ideas on how to get to the executive and back your idea, your ideas with data, because there is a lot of information for you to actually understand where the managers and where the executives will be and what types of things interest them. And these days with platforms like Netflix and Showmax, it's changed a bit as well, because people are just looking for an outlet. So they want to watch something. Sometimes they just watch anything, but they want to watch something. You don't have to grab their attention as much as you did before with trailers. because cinemas is not a big thing anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe I can reach out to Owen Bishops. He's done I'm sure he's interacted with and seen similar reactions. Owen, any comments from your side? I know you do lots of those engagements.
Yes, interesting discussion. I think what's very often happening here is that that's turning it from grabbing the attention of people into telling a proper data story is really essential. And I think what really helps from our perspective often is to really get inside sort of that persona. So from an intellect perspective, which is the company I represent, we think in terms of user personas and try to build up like a whole picture of that person. So that's where our user experience craft also is involved. And then translate this really into a logical flow of data, I guess, that helps them in making the correct decisions on a daily basis in whatever process steps they are working in. But I think one of the key challenges that we often deal with is that once you've grabbed people's attention and you're busy with a story, that story can become too repetitive because it's the same story every time. So how do you make it on a continuous basis, a continual basis, interesting and really grab the people's attention? That's a hard nut to crack, Yule.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I like what you're saying with the persona, especially because it's also, I'll continue. It's also something that I touched on, and I think understanding people is very important. So even when I write a script, I worked on a pilot for a kids program, and I would immediately hand what I've written to a psychologist to say, is this relevant for children? Even though in my mind I think it's relevant for children, as a child psychologist, but when I say the statement, how does a child perceive that statement? And this is questions that we must be asking ourselves, like how, as executive, you can even do a trial on your friend who's an executive or a manager. When I put this out there in this way, what is it that you are reading? And just be honest, shoot until, and it's a trial and error until you get it right, which is why I love storytelling, because storytelling, you keep trying. I mean, how many times have Hollywood, they've got so many scripts that failed, that never made it, but then there's one script that blows up a director and they're huge and it's the best script ever. But before that, there's a trail of scripts and a trail of B-grade movies that really wasn't speaking to the audience. But it's the more you inquire, the more you ask the whys, that's where you get what you need to get. And thank you for your question as well. I will touch on it as we move on. But yeah, thank you.
And there is one example of that, and
Yes.
we found that the term data literacy can be quite offensive to certain executives, because one thing they don't like is almost being found or to be deemed as stupid or illiterate, and so that term has negative connotations, and so your initial message is just, I don't want to be part of this thing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I touch on that later when I speak about metaphors. So a metaphor basically is it can be a visual metaphor, or it can be words that you speak. So it's an analogy. It's like saying a sentence, and you don't have to say the whole sentence. You just say the short sentence, like a diamond in the rough. So if you call someone a diamond in the rough, it sounds like a compliment. But sometimes some people can shoot themselves in the foot by using the wrong language. You could be like, oh, you're not refined. Excuse me, what? No, I mean, but we, so it's important that we watch the way that we speak, and it's important we watch the words that we use, because human beings are not perfect in the sense that they're not computers, And there's so much going on in human psychology. There's so much going on in how someone perceives something, their worldview, according to their upbringing, according to challenges that they faced. So you may think that you're saying something simple, but it has a negative a negative connotation for them. So it's just, yeah. But let me let me move on. This is exciting and great. Then you can stop me at any time if there's a question. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. I'll monitor the chat and stop you if anyone's got a question, Yule.
Okay. Perfect. So storytelling techniques allow us to find a parallel story that we will use as an analogy for interpreting data. So we looked at last week, we looked at some of those techniques that will help us to find and develop these parallel stories, so that people, these parallel narratives, so that people will understand and will help us forge a connection with our target listeners, and a connection that will make them grab onto the vision and see the value in what it is that you are presenting, and also see the true message of what the data is saying, and that the data is fully understood. And I thank you for the conversation that we had before. So I might bring up those points as I speak. So the important thing really is to make sure that your story resonates with your audience. Important is to make sure that they see the value in it. People remember stories that relate to them. People remember things that interest them when scrolling on social media. So if you want to do a social media advert for business people, then find what relates to them and chuck it into Instagram. Maybe they're on Instagram. Because once you make them feel, then that information will be stored in long-term memory. So I'd actually cheat. I would go straight for the emotion, straight for evoking emotion when I'm doing an advert. And I'll play an advert later on. I'll put it on the link for you so you can see quick. You want it quick. You want people to be invested quickly. Go for emotion. And those universal themes in our stories guarantee us relatability and emotional buy-in. And so I spoke about the universal theme of general relevance last week, and I'm going to touch on emotional relevance today. So there's a lot within both of these things, but I'm just giving you a summary of them, really. But these themes hold significance regardless, like I spoke about, regardless of people's culture, people's social standing, individuality. They are what a large group of people have in common. But obviously, if you want to go for a niche group of people, you are still able to do that with your messages, especially with marketing. Like I think Bobby was also bordering on niche. Yeah, it was bordering on niche, but a lot of people went, but they knew exactly what to do. So if you, for example, if you're giving an analogy for your numbers in story form to a diverse crowd, and they say age groups around 20 to 65, this is like a wide range, male and female South Africans, different races, and different social statuses, right? So you think you're giving an example, and let's say your example or your theme that you use is need for speed, quad biking. You've got bikes, you've got fast cars, supercars, but not many people can relate to such a theme. But if you attach a universal, you don't have to completely take out the quad bikes, but if you attach a universal theme, something like crime within your story, then more people can relate. Because unfortunately, in South Africa, we have the third highest crime rate in the world, something that we're not proud of. But most South Africans have been affected by crime or touched by it. So remember, I said general relevance, you have to put a challenge. You have to put a conflict. So if your conflict comes from crime, so use crime as an example, then you are putting more people in the room and more people can understand what you're saying. It ensures that a greater number of people can connect with the narrative because they suddenly go, oh, okay, I understand. But if you're doing something need for speed, maybe people are like, oh, that's awesome. and others are just like, I'm checking out, I'll come back after the story. And yeah, so it's quite important. And with general and with emotional relevance, what I spoke about is that these themes are what at the box office, what directors use. So it's what people, it's what your viewer and what your protagonist are threatened by, and they use that right in the beginning of the film. So if you know the movie The Greatest Showman, which is one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite shows, and it shows how the circus was created, and it tells the story of P.T. Barnum, the founder of the Barnum and Bailey Circus, and how he brings together a diverse group of people, a diverse group of individuals who are considered to be outcasts because of the way, and outsiders by society because of the way that they look or what they lack, and they just look different. So what generally people think what's different, goodbye. So, and there are also many other universal themes that you can find in this movie, but the overarching ones are about embracing diversity and embracing acceptance of individuality. So when you start to recognize different shows, different books, different outlets, different information, and you start to break down what themes are in there, you can see how they're connecting with you. Um, Diversity is a common theme that people can relate to, and to an extent, many people can relate to individuality, especially these days. Everyone is fighting for individuality, for this or that or that, and so it's individuality really has become a thing. Within the movie, you'll also find themes of poverty, of social status, arts, crime, ambition, leadership, sacrifice, and so forth. So all these themes, someone can attach themselves to something, and that's why The Greatest Showman did so well in the box office. So for the data story, finding an analogy in the form of a story that has strong general and emotional relevance themes will keep your listeners engaged emotionally and will keep them connected and interested. So there was, when the Black Panther movie came out, everyone was like, wow. So people of color, we saw ourselves like, oh my gosh, there's a person of color superhero, and that was something that we could attach ourselves to. And that's why the first one did so well, because it leveraged on that. Now the second one didn't do well in the box office, and I've got reasons why it didn't do well, because they can't leverage on the first thing they leveraged on already. It's been leveraged on, so they needed to add another universal theme that will connect to the wider masses, and it fell short on a couple of things. But it's good for us to break down movies and to see exactly what is going on, because once the right theme is there, then people are engaged, they understand the story, they've got ownership of the work, their brains know what's going on, they understand, and then they're able to contribute and to bring, because sometimes people can't contribute because they don't understand the work, or they don't understand what just happened, and they don't understand the procedures. And last week Howard shared a story where the business people were frustrated by the data, because the challenges they faced in bringing the data together. There was a lot of frustration between two different groups. So you had the business people, and you also had the IT, and these groups were just frustrated with each other. IT thought that the business people were blaming them for what was happening, so it was all this blame was flying around, and the frustration from the IT side is that, according to them, the business people we're not doing their jobs. They didn't know what they were doing, is what came out of there. And so you had these sides that had very real challenges, and the very real thoughts towards their challenges of why the challenge was happening. So in their mind, they were convinced this is why, without actually, let's look at the real reason. And the business people, to be honest, they couldn't get the data to work, as it was dirty, it wasn't good quality, and it was causing them problems. So the solution was to look to data governance to improve data quality, so the business people could effectively work with the data, because when the data governance procedures are in place, then the data is clean, they can use it. And both camps, both business and IT, had to see that they were both responsible for improving the quality of the data. So how do we get both teams to see, no, this is not one-sided. This is efforts for both of us. So I would write a story, and how I came up with a good idea. So both groups are the protagonists, right? And their goals are to reach their KPIs, their KPI targets, by making good decisions for the business. And the obstacle, the challenge, is that there was a lack of data quality due to no good systems and processes in place. And remember, the protagonist must always represent the view of your listeners. So you've got two protagonists in the story that Howard came up with. I just elaborated on it a bit. And using more than one protagonist in a story is a way for you to explore different sides of the same conflict. So if you want to bring different angles from people in the business, the way they see different things, then make different protagonists. Don't make someone a villain. Make everyone a hero so they can come out the top. And it's, yes?
I was just saying that's very nice, and it was something that I never thought about. My approach was to almost say, let's try to take the emotion out, and that's where my focus was, is saying, let's do some measurement, let's do some proper assessment, so that everyone will see the same story. What I didn't think about was making both parties the hero of the story, and that's something I didn't pay attention to.
Yes, and Howard, I love that. And there's so much more, but I'm just giving you basics. But I love that when you make people the hero, then there's a collaboration that comes in,
Yeah.
and people aren't fighting for themselves, or people don't walk away feeling shortchanged, like, oh, the business guys won. But it's so. If anyone's ever been to a psychologist who gives like marriage counseling, the psychologist doesn't get there and take sides. That's not their job.
Yeah.
The job of the psychologist is to show you where you could have aided the situation, or where you could have done better, or where you could have thought in a different way to make this vehicle called marriage work. Because so often we walk with blinkers. That's wrong. I'm right. I'm right. You're wrong. And yes, there are wrongs, and yes, there are rights. But we're working with human beings. At the end of the day, we need to get from point A to point B. And to get from point A to point B with the human anatomy is not necessarily, and there's times for it, but it's not necessarily breaking people down. You have to build people up to get to point B, because if they can't walk to point B, you're going to be carrying them. How long are you going to carry them? By the time you get to point Z, you're never going to get there. You want people to be able to carry themselves. So although you address issues, you empower each person, and you take, so storytelling, you want to take a position of, I'm not generally taking sides, especially with the listeners that I'm speaking to. Because I want them to be invested, and I want them to bring their hearts. And it also, I will speak about how to also address issues later within storytelling.
Great, and maybe just to elaborate on the story.
Yes.
What actually happened was we had this massive, lots of emotions. People were actually screaming at each other in the meeting room. And I'd never, I mean, I have seen it before, but this was a bit of a surprise to me. When we did the review, we actually went through almost 3 weeks, and the first week, all of the problems were pointing back to the IT people, and business was saying, yes, look at this, and then once the IT had fixed a certain amount of problems, then we were left with some of the business problems. And so now we switched over now to the business people entering the data incorrectly and doing the wrong analysis. And so it actually lasted a month of different backwards and forwards. So constantly we were having this, you see, but different viewpoints of you see. And it took us a while to overcome both of the situations. So that was another chat.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. And thanks for sharing that, Howard. Because I mean, everyone is really, nobody wants to be at fault. Everybody is really going to the other person just so the light is not shining on them. For any so, uh, so really to get the team to, even if the other person was in the wrong and it comes out that they were in the wrong, to get a mindset amongst the team of okay, what do we do now, rather than you were in the wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? They know they're in the wrong. We've already now it's clear. We've done the research. We can see who was in the wrong. They know they were in the wrong. It's you have to quickly jump on the bus of, oh, okay, what are we going to do to fix it? Then linger on the mistakes too long. You linger on mistakes just to check that we never come here again to get the same problems.
Right.
But
Right.
then you lingered on with that lens.
It was actually very nice, because as the application, first of all, when we presented it, the application person didn't believe us, and they quickly checked the system and they said, oh, shucks, you're right, we got a problem. But the next morning they had a fix and we were able to run it again. And so the business people could see the IT people in the application willing to fix and address the issues, and to a point that within sort of the first 3 or 4 days, it was just application issues. But then after that, it quickly transitioned to the business problems, that they weren't entering data properly, or they were leaving certain product definitions out that were critical to the quality. And so it changed. And that was a great story where they started to work together. As soon as, what I thought it was, as soon as we took the emotions out, then they could see the value of what was happening.
Yes, and there's definitely a space for taking the emotions out. I would leave the emotions within the story,
Right.
and so they would attach themselves to a vision, and the story will spur them into action. It will inspire them to want to fix the problem. It will inspire them to look for different strategies. It will inspire them to work together. So that would be the purpose of the story. And when you take the emotion out of it, is when let's get to work now, because the emotion has been dealt with. I don't. If someone is not completely sold on the idea, you haven't spoken to that idea emotionally for them to be on the same page as you. So really, the storytelling serves for them to be, everything is clear, we are on the same page, I know what I'm doing. Not as in I'm working, but I'm not happy. That's a whole different.
It could be quite interesting in terms of, and I'm sorry I'm interacting too much, but actually stories unfolding, and every single day you're telling a new story.
Yes.
And so you having to build the story up. Yes, at the end of the day, when we gave the executive feedback, then one could list all the emotions, but we were sort of retelling the story as we go.
No, it's true. I mean, every day is a story. Sometimes you come up with stories right there and then. If you think if you think of The Greatest Showman again, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. But if you think of P.T. Barnum, I mean, in South Africa, we've got a word that's called juta. So juta means someone that just puffs you up, but in a lie. Which is not someone that puffs you up just so you can do what they need to do within a lie, which is not great. So P.T. Barnum, to get people to do these things, he would tell them these incredible stories. You're gonna be this, and he would speak to the emotion within them. He would say, look at this person, I need to address them in this manner. Let me sell them this, because, and people would they were like, they went with his vision. They literally went with his vision because he spoke to them emotionally. And that's how he was actually able to build the circus. So I'm not saying let's lie to get people to do what we want them to do. What storytelling is saying is like, let's meet people where they are to get them to buy into the vision. And just to elaborate also on more of your story, Howard, with business and IT, to give the analogy. So basically the analogy that Howard thought of last week was a theme of not managing our financial budget. And so I looked at that, and that falls under the general theme of financial strain and stress. And it also falls under the theme of impact on relationships, and limited opportunities. So those three: financial strain and stress, impact on relationships, and limited opportunities. And again, a reminder that general relevance is born out of the thing that the audience is most threatened by. And that's why I said the films that do great at the box office introduce this thing, this relevant point, this relevant obstacle, and this relevant challenge within the first few seconds of the film to grab the audience's attention, because they know that's where it lies. If you want to grab the audience's attention, bring that theme that is a challenge. So as
So
human
sorry,
beings,
Yule, is that a technique one could use almost in terms of the marketing of your event or the marketing of your meeting, is to bring those emotional issues in very quickly, to almost go at them immediately?
yes, I would suggest that you do go at them immediately, but they don't always have to be shocking. It's not.
Right,
Sometimes they can be mental. So I'm
right,
being dramatic for the sake of Hollywood, but you'll see as we go on of
right.
how I just need you to understand them. But it's not always like, oh, someone got shot or someone. It's not always like that.
Yeah,
But
understood.
when you bring an issue, ears are usually like, that's why people love gossip so much, because there's issues in gossip. No, gossip is not just a nice story. The gossip is about how someone failed, or someone did this, or someone did that. Or it's people. Then people's ears are like, oh, it's like it's humans. We were born to see challenges, and we've been encountering challenges all our lives. It's what we do, and for us, the payoff and what makes sense to us is when these challenges are resolved, and that happens over and over. And that's the method that they use in Hollywood's films over and over again, is the satisfaction of overcoming a challenge. But the challenge must be introduced, so they are invested with the protagonist, like, oh my word, how the protagonist going to get over this, and then they find, so then they find that satisfaction. Okay, this is stuff that's ingrained in us. So just to also to elaborate on more of Howard's story, that's the financial strain. Again, we looked at limited opportunities and just lack of a better word, drama within relationships. And so in Howard's story, the business people and the IT people were the ones that were not frustrated with each other. So immediately you can see, I can link onto that problem. That's a problem. How do I use that problem? So that's the first thing you'll take, is how do I take that problem and put a theme onto it, and then put protagonists onto it. So Howard's story. So let's take a story about a well-off husband and wife who both have a good net income, and now suddenly find themselves in the scenario whereby their daughter has to go for a hospital, an emergency hospital procedure, but they can't afford to take her for hospitalization because the management of the financial budget was so poorly done, if done at all. And so now they find themselves in this place with all these questions, and the budget being poorly done has led them to neglect the medical aid installments. So medical aid hasn't been paid, so medical aid has now booted them, and here they are. They actually, there's no reason why they didn't have to pay medical aid, and then they didn't do their budget. So the couple's decision has led to limited opportunities, and they find themselves with the only option of an untrusted, underfunded, and understaffed public hospital. And now they must take it there. And the emotional stress of it and blame game begins to run now between two parties, between the two protagonists, between husband and wife, despite them actually having a synergy within the same goal. So there's a synergy in the team. We both want the same, we both have the same goal, and we both want the same intentions for our family. So there's a love there, but now it's being disrupted and questions are flying. We're earning enough. Why were the installments not paid? Weren't you handling that? Wait, when did this happen? Everyone is confused. Wait, when did this happen? What month was it when the installment stopped? No one knows the answers because no one's been following the paper trail. Why are we paying for that and not for the medical aid? That doesn't make sense to pay for, because now what, we're going to a public hospital. Fear starts to set in, an emotionally relevant theme of its own, as husband and wife drift further away from each other. And as they drift further away from each other, their daughter now feels sad and she feels guilty. She's the sick one. She feels guilty, although everything is her fault. On top of her illness, she carries the biggest strain and consequences of a poorly managed finances. This story is a touching look at what happens to a family when they don't handle their money well, when they don't put procedures in place, where budgets were not managed, and Excel sheets were not in place. There was no record of money in, there was no record of money out, there was no record of any recons. There was they now they can't even follow paper trail of whose fault it actually was. So now they're just going to they're blaming everyone, and no one knows whose fault it is now. So this is a parallel to what happens when data is managed poorly and procedures are not followed. And so now what you have is a wedge between business and IT. So now it may just seem the wedge is only about this, just about the data. But if someone goes and asks someone in that department, they may give them a cold shoulder about something else that's not even related, because now you've got this thing. And even though data and IT have similar goals, and they both care about getting the same thing done, they both care about their KPIs, ultimately, like the daughter, the business suffers the most. And if anything happened to the daughter in Howard's story, life would be very different. And in the story, if anything happened to the business because of incorrect procedures, or procedures not being followed or implemented or not in place, then it would be negative towards the business. So what is the solution? So the solution now would be the same as the husband and wife story. Let's sit and relook at our procedures to see if they're being implemented or how effective they are. Or let's put procedures in place where there aren't any. Like Howard said, what he spoke about now, they had to go and look and follow trail to see where the actual problems were. And once the IT had fixed those problems, then there was also something for the business guys to do. And if you look at emotional relevance, which I want to speak about today, and also I'll link the story, Howard's story with that, is that emotions are a part of us. They are part of our human experience. And emotions transcend cultural and individual barriers, more actually than the general relevance themes sometimes that don't speak specifically to emotions. And in my opinion, really, emotions are the epitome, the foundation of general relevance themes. And that's why I spoke in the beginning, I think it was in webinar 1, where I used that quote from Maya Angelou. People may forget what you've said. She's learned that people may forget what you've said. People may forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel. And the way you made them feel will remind them of the scenario and the information. And most importantly, even if they might even forget some information, but what they won't forget is that they are invested. What they won't forget is that they see value. And what they won't forget is that they are 100% in this partnership and they want things to work out. So a strong emotion causes the memory that's related to the strong emotion to be stored more effectively and longer in the brain. And if you want to have that emotional connection, then really we're going to have to look at emotional relevance, emotional relevant themes. So not just generally, they're different to general relevance, but they're very, very similar. There's a thin line, and sometimes they overlap each other. But really, the key here is that with emotional stories, they must resonate with real experience, own experiences and feelings of your listener. And one such universal emotion is the desire to be loved. Everybody has this desire. It is ingrained in human anatomy, it's ingrained in the human being, and any threat to the sense of love can evoke strong emotional responses. It's something that we are born with, and it's something that we can't escape. yeah, when it's threatened, we get fear, we get anger, then we start looking for different strategies to make sure we feel loved, even though some people say no, we don't want love. They do. It's the way we're made. And also belonging is also another powerful theme. If you look at my slide here, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we are alerted to basic and fundamental human needs here. And there are many different ways and strategies that we as humans use to ensure that these needs are met. So if you're thinking of Howard's story, right? So think of business and IT. Their goal was to meet KPI. So if you're looking here at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that goal falls under safety. So it falls under safety needs, where you have personal security, employment, resources, health, and property. There are others. This is just a summary. And emotionally, they needed personal security also, because I need to reach my KPIs. This is my employment. This is my job. And part of that was to make sure that they remain employed. And data governance procedures not being in place is what was threatening their security. So these needs in Maslow's table of needs really is, in his opinion, which is a fact of very many psychologists, affect every single one of us. The story that Howard would tell as an analogy also fell under safety. There was a real threat to health. You see, safety is also in health. So then I chose to make the analogy health, because it also falls under safety. We are looking at safety. I don't know if this is making sense to you. We are looking at safety, so let's make my analogy also fall within safety.
Okay.
Something that the business and IT people could also relate to. And the theme on a secondary level, there's lots of themes and stories. The theme on a secondary level was the need to feel loved and to belong. If you really go down to the basic and you ask questions, that's what you will find at right at the blueprint. And people want to do great work. And when people are appreciated for the great work that they do, when people are when people are appreciated for the great work that they do, then they have this connection that they form with work, with family. It becomes a harmonious environment, one with collaboration. But if that is threatened, like in Howard's example, by dirty data, then with regards to the analogy, the connection also between mom and dad and daughter was threatened, and no one was being loved. So this will also help you. Such tables will also help you look into the human psyche and come up with stories. You see, by understanding and using these emotional themes, you can make a deeper connection with your audience. And this connection taps into shared experiences, shared human experiences, and that's the key word. They have to find a shared human experience within it, and it makes whatever information you need to come across real. So this with emotional relevance is where it becomes real. It's not just something it's not part of me. It's just something in the business that's there, and I will come and I will work on it. But it becomes part of them. It becomes part of their world. Because to be honest, I mean, we spend most of our lives working for a business and at work. Why can't it be part of our world?
Mm.
And,
so maybe,
yes.
sorry, maybe we can just pause there. It's
Yes.
getting a bit late, so just to maybe open up and allow people. I think you've really shown some good examples of how to build a story. Maybe if there are anyone that would like to ask some more detailed questions of Yule in terms of applying that analogy. Erwin, I don't know if that helps you with some of that continuing that story and changing the message. Does that help in any way?
Sorry, Howard, I also wanted to ask, I know it's getting quite late. I just wanted to ask if I can it's a 2-minute video, and then we can start discussions.
Okay. All right. Let's do this video.
I think it will be important to show. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to posting the link just because it doesn't play well. So if you can quickly go watch it, please. as we closing with questions.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very, very encouraging message.
Yes, I'm glad.
Okay.
So, what themes did you pick up there, Howard?
Yeah, it's just, I love that thing of consistency. That's
Yeah.
something that you have to be, it's so important to us.
Yes. So this, if I was within the business, I'm a creative, but this for me, it speaks to me even as a creative, but it would speak in, sometimes people are like, "Ah, same job over and over again for how many
Yeah, yeah,
but you see you make some difference, and that's all people want to know. Really, people don't want to know you about your numbers. They want to know internally that they make a difference, that
right.
being there, but yeah, can we open up
Yeah.
the discussion?
Sorry, so Erwin that I called on, he had to leave, so it's a
Oh,
pity. We just missed him.
oh no.
Okay. Maybe we can just open it up to some other people. Anybody else would like to ask Yula a question in terms of applying that story? I think she shared lots of different techniques. So any other questions? How did you? Let me ask Mr. Bolton. Paul, anything from your side? When the people go quiet, I start asking.
No, I was trying to, when we're talking about consistency, one of my favorite quotes in our notes in our course is about consistency in data quality.
Yeah.
The theme of consistent inputs, consistently applied.
Yes, that
consistent
SBC.
results.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I'm trying to say, well, how do we find that word that's relevant to the various aspects of data management to do that, like the story you just showed about the planting of trees?
Yeah.
So that would be for me, it would be a great advert for data quality. The consistency to achieve a goal, to achieve I suppose not just data quality, but in terms of data governance and processes, SAPOC, those kind of things. Why do we want to mature the data management procedures and get that consistency? Is because you're going to get that growth, that maturing, so I'm using an example that's already done, like you showed us, but I'm saying, how do I find those words to build a story around in the various knowledge areas and the various deliverables? And it's yeah.
Yeah. So a good idea would actually also to use that video, but with each department that you're speaking to, add a different theme.
Yeah.
That's relevant within the department. So you'd be searching. You can search Google for lots of themes just to give you ideas as well, just to get your mind thinking with a certain group of people, like what theme would be relevant to them, and how I can use the same story but slightly give more emphasis to a certain message within the message of consistency.
Yeah. Also, what I loved about it is there's nothing wrong with creative thinking, meaning a desired result and with therefore a desired story.
Yes.
A made up story for a desired result. But what's awesome about that video is a history lesson of what has happened.
Yes.
So and that's why we lean on fellas like Howard, like Mark, etc., because they've gone through the trenches, they've brought these stories that we can link on or leverage off for delivery, where this worked, because I think like how it could tell the story of when it came up. But the idea was, what's in it for me? This gentleman chirped him and said, okay, great, you've done all this cool work, but what's in it for me? How's it going to help me? You know? And it's through it's finding those stories to build these adverts, the storylines to sell the why the deliverable that's in the DMBOK that thought leader said is relevant and appropriate and useful, and it brings value. What there's the story of why.
And also I just want to add there, just in terms of the way the world is going right now, it is all about me. But within our human make, we do want to do something nice for somebody else. We want to make a change in somebody else's life, although we may not be living it. So when we see videos like that, it's like, wow, it's one man, but he's building trees for everybody. It's not it's growth for everyone. So even if you speak to that, although people don't know it, it is also ingrained in us somehow in there, so that they want to actually do something, look outside of themselves as well.
Yeah. It's like a butterfly effect, right?
Yes.
The flap of a butterfly's wing can turn into a tornado. So
yeah, it's beautiful. Does anybody else want to ask any questions or give input, or even what you thought about the video, or if there's any movies that have caught your attention? Don't be shy. There's no wrong answers.
all gone quiet.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Because nobody watches movies anymore. Okay.
Oh, but series, like a lot of you are watching series these days. You can also find some. It's not, and in this day and age, it's not only about movies. You find this theme in any piece of information.
So I'll share, Yule,
Yes.
about 2 weeks ago, I was feeding Sophie. It's my routine. We bath at 6:30, and then I go and sit with Sophie, and Melinda handles Kate. And I put on 2 documentaries on Sly, Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold. It's on Netflix.
Yes.
And what was so amazing is, like, different paths, as we know, both ended up, yes, in movie and film, and Arnold went on to do other things. But what really triggered and stuck with me is when they were youngsters, they saw shucks up, I've forgotten his name now, the bodybuilder Reg Parks.
Okay.
Yes.
And they saw his photo. He was with, like, Mr. Universe, and he was like, wow, check this guy. And he was in a movie, Conan the Barbarian. And so both of them, actually 2 different worlds, one in America, one in Germany or in Austria, both used that guy, and they said, there's my blueprint.
Wow.
I just have to do what he did. And, you know, I can achieve what he did if I just follow I find all his articles, I find his whole history, and they both followed him. And as you know, both were in film, and both got all built up, tough guys, this kind of thing. And I just find that quite intriguing, is find that mentor with their blueprints, follow his life, follow his story, and you're obviously going to bring your character and your flavor to the journey, I hope. But something like that in film, that can, the storytelling of their story, and again, it leans on what I just said, leaning on how to say, shucks, where did you use this business glossary before? You know, everybody shouts about how important it is, but no one's got one. Or a very weak one. How did it help you? What situation did it solve in a past engagement? So there's a blueprint, there's a recipe, and just go with it. Yeah?
And I love that, Paul. Thank you for sharing that story. And you also got me thinking in terms of managers and executives. You know, if you can find an executive who's got an amazing blueprint and who's got a testimony of training and different things, and then the other executives could look up to him and go, wow, what have you done? So and in different parts of the world, you know, it's also it's beautiful because people do relate to people. That's why I always say personal stories are better, although it doesn't negate the power from even a made-up story.
Yeah.
But personal stories are always the best.
You, Yule. I think that was fantastic. I really appreciate that. So if there aren't any more questions, Shimi, I don't know about you. I know you also need to get into lots of storytelling. You do lots of advisory and consulting. I hope that helps. I hope everybody's seeing the
That helps a lot.
value of
Thank you.
what. Thanks. Fantastic, Shimi. Great. Thanks, Yule. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Thanks,
And
everyone.
we'll see you again
Bye.
next week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Those on the call that's doing data quality, you need to tell stories tomorrow when you do your DQ assessments.
But real stories, not stories.
I'm talking to you, Shimi.
Coming through, don't worry.
Cool, man.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Captain. Cheers, man.
Cheers, guys.